Welcome everyone. My name's Peter Langford. I'm the Director of Voice Project. It's great that you're all able to join us. If you're in Sydney, I hope you're rugged up. It was 13 degrees when I arrived this morning, which is hard for us precious Sydney people to bear. The feature for today is to hear from St John Ambulance New South Wales about their impressive change journey. I'll introduce the speakers, Sarah and Vanessa, in a moment. The agenda for today will be that I'll do a quick introduction. The presentation itself will go for about 35 minutes and then we'll have about 20 minutes of questions at the end. I encourage everyone to please submit your questions throughout the session, and we will be capturing those, and then I'll go through those questions and we'll try to address as many as possible when we get towards the end. But for a quick initial poll, we'd love to know what sector you're in. So if you can quickly provide a little bit of that feedback to us, that'd be great. We'll touch upon that a little bit later, and that'll help our presenters get a bit of a sense of who's out there as well when we're addressing the questions. All right, a little bit of introduction to Voice Project. For those of you who don't know us, our core purpose is improving organisations by giving people a voice. We predominantly specialise in workplace surveys, so employee surveys, 360 surveys, customer surveys, and any mechanism that contributes to voice in organisations. We've grown out of a research project at Macquarie University, and since 2002 we've delivered over 3 million surveys to employees and customers. The awards that led to today's presentation, I'll just give you a quick background to those. We started them a few years ago. There are plenty of awards out there that recognise high-performing organisations, but what motivates us at Voice Project are the clients, the organisations that show positive movement in their scores when they're working with us. So the point of these awards, the Change Challenger Awards, is to recognise those organisations that achieve impressive changes in their scores over time. In 2019, our finalists were shortlisted from over 105 organisations, and we had detailed submissions from the finalists, and they were scored by expert judges. I put up on the slide there the judges that were involved. This year we had Andrew O'Keefe, who's the Director of Hardwired Humans, Frank Sedmak, the General Manager of People and Culture from Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and myself. The finalists, I'll quickly acknowledge them. We had 3 categories based on the size of the organisation. For those organisations less than 200 staff, we had Getz Healthcare, Graduate Student Association of University of Melbourne, Heart Kids, Kids Undercover, Red Kite, and Tenterfield Shire Council. In the large category, which was 200 to 1,000 staff, we had Frontier Software, Jewish Care, Keolis Downer, Rua Community Services and Therapy Focus. And in the enterprise category, which is over 1,000 staff, we had Ality Aged Care, St John Ambulance New South Wales, Swinburne University of Technology, Victoria University, and the Y, previously known as YMCA New South Wales. We did have a few organisations, or 3 organisations, that were so close to winning their category that we thought it was worthwhile giving them highly commended awards. And they went to, in the small category, we had Getz Healthcare and the Graduate Student Association of the University of Melbourne, who came up with highly commended awards. And in the enterprise category, just behind our presenters today, we had Ality Aged Care. But the winners of the 3 categories were, in the small category, Tenterfield Shire Council, in the large category, Jewish Care, and of course in the enterprise category this morning, we're going to hear from St John Ambulance New South Wales. So without any further delay, I will introduce our speakers today. We'll switch between initially Sarah Lance and then move to Vanessa Lorford-Mills. Sarah is the CEO of St John Ambulance New South Wales, as well as an independent non-executive director, and indeed was a director of St John New South Wales before taking on the CEO role. Her past experience spans entrepreneurial startup conference companies, postgraduate vocational education and training organisations, both corporate and not-for-profit sectors in Australia, the USA and New Zealand. Vanessa Lorford-Mills is the General Manager of Performance and Culture at St John Ambulance, New South Wales. An experienced people and culture leader, strong commercial acumen in retail, commercial, professional services, as well as for-purpose, not-for-profit organisations across Australia and New Zealand. So, without any further delay, I will hand over to Sarah Lance to hear about the impressive ongoing change journey at St John Ambulance, New South Wales. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, and I'm really glad you said ongoing. So it really is a journey for us. We're probably 2 years into that journey now, and it's a great opportunity to talk to you particularly about the first parts of that journey, what it looked like, and you also did mention that it's not the shiny star, it's actually how well, I suppose, where we've gone, and that we have had massive improvements. I'd really like to say thank you particularly to Peter and also to Louise. I don't know how many of you have actually worked with them already, but you will know their incredible customer service, their kindness and their genuine empathy when you're going through this program. They're also people that you can laugh with when you think, oh my God, I've got no other choice but to laugh. So, who is St John? If you think about St John, think about what we're here for. We're here to save lives through first aid. It's a really interesting thing. I suppose the best way to talk about us is we're that 10 minutes between an accident or an incident or an emergency, and with that 10 minutes of healthcare that can be provided before an ambulance arrives. And as you know, the ambulance is busting itself to get there, but they're 12, 14 minutes at the quickest of times. So what happens in that 10 minutes? Either you've got our guys in green who are all trained in first aid, or you'll have somebody who has been trained by us. So we train 57,000 people per year in first aid courses, across first aid, across anaphylactic and a whole range of them. And we also sell all of the kits, all the defibrillators, all of the equipment what you'll see out there. And that's a really important thing, that people have to feel enabled, that they can actually do the first aid, they can actually get out there, but they've got to have the equipment to either, perform CPR, perform defibrillation, keep airways open, or stop the bleed. And that's really what we're about. So you can see here we're profit for purpose, which means that this is a commercial organisation, and it has to be. So you can see on the slide some of the commercial activities that we do, which is very much around those sort of training and kits. But the core reason we do it is because we want those outcomes in the community. We probably do about free 25,000 people, free training in CPR to build that community resilience. We're part of the health plan for emergency response in triage or evacuation. But one of our, I suppose, our core elements is this beautiful event health services. And our events in the community can be literally small community events, or they can be large-scale city to surf, or the other weekend I went to Maitland for the Groove in the Moo, which is a music festival, and there's a lot of news about music festivals. So at one event like that, we would have people that would be first responders going through the music festival to look and to see if there are any problems or issues. There'd be people that were actually coming into what is, in essence, is a medical centre, because they've got nurses on triage. You've also then got, I call it the vomit room, this room, because kids are so sick. So you've got kids either vomiting or crying, either one in that first room. In the second room is when it starts to get serious, where they're actually making sure that they're measuring their temperatures constantly, because kids that have taken MDMA, their organs start to burn up. And you've got to make sure that if they are at rest and the temperature increases, what are you going to do? And you got to get them to hospital. And then you've got the really super serious. So we probably would have sent, at that particular event, 13 people via ambulance to hospital, and another person was intubated and airlifted. So when you're talking about saving a life, to me, that's what you're talking about, is really saving a life. We're in the enterprise category, but our makeup is 200 staff members, but it's then 3,500 volunteers. So it is a very, very different way of operating. Those 3,500 magical volunteers are actually split across 80 divisions. So already you see these issues that we might have around silos and around communication. So why did we start the journey? Now remember, Peter said that it doesn't mean that we started somewhere shiny, because we certainly didn't start somewhere shiny. There was a lot of conflict within the organisation. The easiest way that I can probably talk about it is that volunteers were facing this way, looking out to what they were doing, and corporate was facing this way, not responding to what the volunteers needed at all. And you think, how did it get like that? I don't think that there was any one issue or fault. I think this is something that's been building over 30 years. There was, in the commercial activities, there was a very strong focus on commercial and making money to put into the rest of the organisation. And in fact, even in one person's PD that I looked at, it actually said that they were not allowed to talk to volunteers. So you can see this sort of warping that had happened. And of course, volunteers on the other side are going, for heaven's sakes, you know, where are you helping us? How are you helping us and enabling us to do our job? And it's just not happening. So this is where the scary thing comes. We also had quite a divisive or a disconnect between the executive and the board, and also within the board. And you will know very well from your own organisations, if you haven't got that sense of we're all on one team, it can really go awry. The frustration belt, Peter did mention that I was on the board, so clearly I was in the faction of, well, where's the voice project? We need to bring it in. And we did have a number of board members leave, and we had a change of CEO. So it's looking really good at the minute, isn't it? So when I turn to this next slide, you're not going to be surprised when you see a lot of red. Looking at this slide, you can see that the passion and engagement is there. All of the people, and this is across volunteers and staff, love St John. They love it's family. This is why we are here. It gives us purpose. We love the type of work that we do. We love the vision of the organisation and what it can achieve. And we're satisfied, we're happy in our own little area, our own little team, but we're not going anywhere. We don't feel like we're actually moving forward. You can see then, going a bit to the left-hand side of the screen, a bit more of the ugly red. But to me, the thing that really, really came out here was that organisational direction. It was the feeling that everybody had a vision for the organisation, but it wasn't actually connected across everybody. Everybody was in their siloed position. Nobody knew where we were going, and nobody agreed on that journey or that pathway. And that's a critical part of it for me. You can be as passionate as you want, but you're not going to get anywhere unless you've actually set up that vision for the organisation, built the strategy to get there, and also looked at those underpinning values and behaviours that are actually going to give you that momentum for that journey. You can see in the central part, they pretty much, everybody liked what they were doing. They liked their team. They actually liked their supervisor and manager, but that was it. Pretty much outside of that, they hated everybody. Good place to start, see? And this is what I say a lot. There are lots of opportunities. So this is the part, as I said, of what we did, and I'll take you through a bit of that journey around the development of the vision and the values and behaviours, and the strategy, and how we started to think differently about strategy. Because one of the most important things that we needed to do was to get rid of these silos and get everybody thinking that they were part of St John, not just of their small division. First thing is with the release of the results, and you saw that they weren't pretty results, was we needed to get out there, and it had to be face-to-face. Vanessa and I and a number of other of our executives came along with us. We needed to talk to the board, we needed to talk to the executive, the senior managers, senior volunteers. Everybody had to be aware of what it really was like. We actually had to say, look, this is it. We can't muck around here anymore. We actually need to move forward. So we really did talk about the good, the fantastic things, the passion, the organisation, the commitment, but also about the bad and also about the really ugly and what did that look like. And there was no belief in leadership, and that had to change. I think for me, one of the most interesting things in doing something like this, because at the time it was an angry organisation. It was still doing amazing things out in the community, but it was angry within itself and within each division. There wasn't one single element of whether it was within corporate, within the different divisions, that actually had harmony and belief in each other. So when you're addressing these things, it's really important to almost take it like grief counselling. I don't know what's the best way to do it, but to really be honest and then accept what is being said. You may have heard another story, but it doesn't matter. It's an individual's perception. And sometimes the only way around was really to be saying, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that that's the environment or what happened. I know particularly for some of the executives who had been through this journey, it was so hard for them not to say, oh no, but I didn't mean that. They actually had to just accept it and go, I'm really sorry that that's how you saw it. So we started off with that. It was a really important step to actually make sure that all of the voice information was going back to everybody. And you'll see this constantly in everything that we did throughout this year and a half is back again to everybody in our membership. So our first step was to create a shared vision for the organisation, and we did that differently in that we chose photographs to do it. We had about 42 different photographs. You can see the example up there on the screen of the 9 that were finally chosen. I think we had about 16 different workshops. Or each table would have a set of 42 photographs, and they would look through and they would have to decide as a team what did that look like for their vision of the organisation. But they had to agree on what photographs they were putting forward, what were the 9 top photographs. And for me, the important thing was these really beautiful, rich conversations that people were having around those tables, because you could see they care, and it was reigniting that it was harnessing the passion that we knew was there, but giving that as the guiding light. And you can see that, you know, the organisation believed in innovation and diversity, teamwork. It needed to listen and mentor, and above all, it needed a strategy to move forward, but it also had to have fun. And it gave us a place to say, okay, if that's where we want to be, how do we actually want to get there? Because the only way is changing our behaviours. And as I said, you know, we started in an angry place, and angry places sometimes have unacceptable behaviours, and that actually had to change and a line had to be drawn. So I can't remember how many behaviours I had, I think, you know, probably way too many, that people had to go through and work out what were their top, 5 or 6. And again, with this, we then listened to all the conversations, brought together all of the values that they had selected. And when we were then, the pictures, so the top 9 pictures that came up, when we're looking at the values, they were the top values that came up. So, and this is really, really important for to be authentic and to reflect back what was actually chosen. And you can see when you have a look at the language, and maybe have a look at it a bit later, when I was writing it, because I'd been at all of these meetings, I was reflecting the language that they used. So that any time a member or staff member, a volunteer looked at it, they went, yes, I remember that conversation. This is what we believed. And to me, that is a critical part if you're actually going to embed it within your culture. So each step, as I said, keeps coming back. We came back with all of these to the board and the council, to staff members, and across to all our divisional managers. And I remember I said there were 80 divisions. We included all of the leadership, but we made sure that we went across to all of those divisions because they were the ones that led their teams and could actually start talking to individual volunteers on the ground. And we needed some sort of communication structure before we built one, which Vanessa will talk about a little bit later. We actually had to have some way of getting to the ground, to grassroots, because that was a critical thing. So we had discussions with all the divisional managers. What does good look like? What does bad look like? But more importantly, what does it look like in your context? So we did skits around what was good, what was bad. We tried to bring humour and life into it. The cadet teams, we've got about 650 cadets as well. Out of that 300,000 volunteers, and cadets teams did the most hysterical things and pictures and paintings that went along with it because it had to be real. These behaviours then had to be embedded in everything that we do. So I mentioned a little bit ago how important that alignment is between the board and the executive and leadership team, and that's what had really gone astray before as well, which had, forced that anger. And so our next step is we've got vision, of what we want to achieve. We've got the behaviours of how we're actually going to try how we're going to walk the talk. And then we needed to say, well, what's the journey? What's the strategy? And how do we think about strategy so that everybody participates in it? So we then had strategy sessions, and the first one started with the executive team, the board, and this is across staff and volunteer. This is the first time that that group of people had ever come together, and it was a really unique experience for everybody to say, no, we are one team. We're not two siloed organisations, let alone 50 to 80 silos within. So this is sort of an interesting part for those of you who are working in strategy. You'll often find that organisations do it by sort of product or service. So we could have said, well, what's going to happen in training? What's going to happen in our products? What's going to happen in our event health services? And then people is sort of off to the side, almost like an additional element. The crucial part for us was people actually come first, which means that every single person had to see themselves in this strategy. The screen will show you a strategy on a page, and I always think, you try and get to simplest possible communication methods and so that people can see what it is. But you'll see across the strategic goals, we haven't gone in a traditional manner. We've gone engage, enable, reimagine and future-proof. And we've specifically done that, as I said, to cut across the silos. In every single thing that we do, we look at how do we engage? How do we engage with each other? How do we engage with our community? How do we actually enable our organisation? How do we make it easier to volunteer with? But every time we're doing that, how are we reimagining it? We've got to think differently. And often it's not chucking the baby out with the bathwater either, because we've often found that what happened in the past is actually gold. So maybe the baby's worth it, maybe the soap's worth it, maybe the bubbles, but reimagine what it looks like and bring it to life. But each time we've got to be commercial, so we've got to future-proof the organisation as well. So again, it was a different way of doing it. This is the highest level that came out from the board executive strategy. I then needed people to think collectively and out of their box. So we've got engage, enable, reimagine, future-proof, which becomes a bit of our mantra. I also had to get people to think across 2018, 2019, 2020, and what did that look like? We needed desperately to develop that trust and respect, and in that process be developing our capabilities and our capacity, because we really want to be in a leadership position. So to do that, to enable the organisation and enable people to build their strategies, instead of saying this is what you must achieve, I wrote a story around 2018, 2019, 2020 about what that could look like at the end of the year. What was it when we had, built a values-based organisation, built on trust and respect, or about building a capacity for growth and a solid foundation? You'll be glad to know that these are actually full-length pages, and I've only given you a snapshot of it, but it was really to get people moving on a journey and understanding that it wasn't just 1 year of change or one element of change, that it was constantly going to be thinking about, and that lovely word iterative, of what it looked like. How well did we do by the end of the year? how do we shape it for the next year? So very much saying, this is a journey that we want you to be on, and it will keep changing based on your advice and your thoughts. We also had to get people thinking differently about the future. We had to look at what our core programs are, and that's from a commercial as well as a community and an outcomes focus. But then we also needed to say, well, what's emerging? What are the things, where are the positioning in emergency services or in community services or in commercial services where we should be? And we need to think about them now. If we're not thinking about them now, they ain't going to happen. And exactly the same thing, unless we're thinking of those really new ideas that may be quite different and send us in a different pathway, unless we're starting to research them and think about them and gather those ideas now, again, in 2020, we're not going to be anywhere. So it was getting everybody to understand this is the structure within which we think about strategy. And this I'm saying throughout the organisation. So we put it together in a book, and you've got the front page here and just an example of one of the pages, but it actually has that whole how we develop strategy and the explanation in it, but it also has the story for each year, and then engage, enable, reimagine, future-proof, the initiatives and the KPIs at the back of it. It's something for me and for all of our executive team and for any new member, whether they're a staff or a volunteer, to have a place to start, to say, this is where we are. It talks about our vision, our values. It talks about our dreams and aspirations. So it's a place to bring new people on the journey with us. We then report back, and this is one of the critical things for us as well. We're always reporting back to our divisional members, to our managers, but we've changed the way that we're talking to them. So there is this element of being real and truthful about our organisation, how well it's going. It's also looking at, well, what are we actually doing along our engage, enable, reimagine and future-proof? Is there momentum? Helping people understand the momentum. So often, if you're at grassroots, you can't see that momentum. You can't see what's happening. So it's a reminder of actually, where are we on the journey and the things are happening? And of course, every time we went for feedback, but we didn't anymore just take feedback. It was actually an opportunity for everybody in that room, whether it was staff, divisional managers, to actually, or leaders of the organisation or the board, to say, okay, well, what does that look like? And how do we then make the change? What are the things that we think? We can see that's a problem, whether it's the finances, whether it's technology. What are the ways that we can work together to actually move forward? And that's a critical pathway as well, that suddenly we were all working together. But this process, this is probably the third time that we've gone back again to all of our stakeholders as well. So it is very much a journey. And finally, from my part, before I hand over to Vanessa, it's formed into almost like, I said a mantra before, but it's how do we take action? How do you think about things? If you're in St John and you're making a decision about anything or looking at what direction we should take, are you engaging people? Don't make that decision by yourself. Are you engaging people in that journey? Are you actually making it easier? Because, oh my God, there are things that are so complicated in our organisation, I can't tell you. And we're constantly spending the time going, hey, can't this be simpler? Reimagining, are you thinking about it? Are you thinking about, well, what are the other options? There are so many different ways of doing this. We don't have to follow the past, or we can even go back to the future. Finally, future-proof. We've got to be commercial. We've got to be thinking the more that we can have commercial activities, the more we can actually give back into our community, and that's what we're about. So that mantra of every action counts, think about it when you're taking the action. So that's part of the journey. Behind all of that, there are a whole lot of critical projects that Vanessa is going to talk about, and for me, it's been such a fantastic part of the journey. I shouldn't call her my partner in crime, but in many ways in this journey, it's been great to have somebody to be working with and to be so passionate about the organisation and what we can achieve. So over to Vanessa.
Thanks, Sarah. So in all the core focuses that I want to take you through, actually establishing the trust and the working relationships between staff and volunteers was a really underpinning piece. at all levels across the organisation. So it was about making sure that we were connecting in with that passion and that commitment that people just have in abundance in the organisation. Everybody really wants the organisation to succeed. So the reality was, as Sarah talked about, that the organisation wasn't working as a team. And not only was there a divide between corporate and volunteers, but also within teams. So my team's great, but everyone, all the other teams out there, there was a lot of finger pointing going on. So it was really important as a first step to create the collaborative, integrated organisational structures. So the starting point really was around combining the exec team, and we needed to bring the volunteer structure and the corporate structure together. And that meant then that we've been working together and all of our strategies have been aligned. So a critical first step. Then what we did in the volunteer space is that we have turned around and created zones and hub areas for the 80 divisions. And that's been enormously helpful because we've created greater communities where there's greater collaboration actually and communication taking place. In the process of what we did on the next slide is that we turned around and went through a very transparent process around how we did the recruitment for these new roles of zone and hub leaders. So we were very clear that people that were appointed to the roles needed to be able to demonstrate the values and demonstrate their commitment to the direction that we were heading. So we ended up being able to also find people that were passionate within divisions to be able to step up, and some that were from around the organisation as well. So we've been able to build really solid teams that have directly tackled some of the feedback that we had in Voice, with a whole robustness around recruitment and selection process. The reason why it's been so important to get these hub areas working well is because there's greater sharing of precious resources. So ambulances and medical equipment, the more that we have the divisions working together, the more it's better outcomes for community and getting what we need for saving lives through first aid out there on the ground across the organisation. We also realised that increasing the communication rather than the workshops that we had done, which were great as a starting point, but we needed to make sure that we could get a cascade going up and down the organisation, particularly in the volunteer space. So one of the enablers has been using Zoom, and what it's meant is that it's just really connected everyone together, because these 80 divisions and our 3,500 volunteers are really spread out geographically across the state. So that's made a big difference. Another structural change is we've created advisory groups to give advice across a whole bunch of areas across the organisation, so into corporate as well as into volunteer. And we've also integrated the volunteering into corporate as well. And one example of that is that now we've got all of the support services, so peer support, chaplaincy and EAP within the people, performance and culture team, as opposed to previously it being separate. So there's more of a consistent approach to all of our members and the fabulous support that they get, because even just in our peer support team, we've got up to 30 trained psychologists and counsellors, an amazing skill to really enable all of the good work that happens out there in the communities. The other organisational change that we did was to create a number of project teams, so that in the areas of child safety, health and safety, volunteer information portal and the leadership program, which I'll talk about shortly, But we turned around and we asked who was keen to be able to contribute to these areas. And we got this amazing response. We got always at least over 20 volunteers, great skills, expertise and passion. So then we've been actually working together in sorting out these important areas to get it working well. And I think as professionals, and I know in some of the seminars that we've had before, a number of CEOs and senior professionals, that in our experience along the way in our careers, we can fall into the trap of seeing we know best because we've had experiences with it, but there's a trap with that you can fall into thinking you do know best. When you turn around and invite from the wider crowd or teams within your organisation to go get those pool of ideas and get those integrated teams working, I've got to say the results have been so much better. We've got the buy-in, we've got the active demonstration of collaboration as our value, but it's embedded what's been co-created so more powerfully, and it'll be so much more sustainable. The other area I wanted to touch upon briefly was the leadership program. It was critical to be able to get the connection with the values and making authentic-based leadership take place. So we needed a common language across all of our leaders because every 130-odd leaders had been doing very much their own style and approach, and it had tended to be command and control. And we needed to get a consistent way that was going to be aligned with the values. So many of you will have your own leadership programs that you will have put in place. You know the beauty of having those take place. I think what was maybe unique to what we did was that we had over 8 volunteer leadership facilitators, and they partnered with the L&D partner within my team and co-created parts of the program, but they did the program together so that the follow-through, very importantly, in the commitment that leaders had created with a personal development plan from the program, that the volunteer facilitator has been doing those one-on-ones, and we've been making sure that we've been following through in our commitment with those. We've actually found that groups actually have liked doing the one-on-ones on a group basis. And again, we've ended up getting a real mix of collaboration across the hubs and across corporate and the volunteer team. So that's been a real winner, and seeing some good results coming through from that. The last one that I wanted to just pull out was enabling members to feel safe and to have voice. Now, we're very much still on the journey, but it has been important for us to say that it's okay and valued to have voice and to have that safety around it. We've, for example, with the child safety area, because Sarah's talked about, we've got these beautiful juniors and cadets, and 70% of our people at St John is under 30 years of age and under, which a lot of people don't realise. So it's important for us around that voice for youth and feeling safety. And we use the opportunity to go, right, let's be honest, where are we at? And be authentic to saying, you can tell us what you think. And then what we did was we got this tremendous buy-in, and we've ended up getting 48 child wellbeing officers that, over and beyond their volunteering roles and working within the organisation, they've actually turned around and come on board to champion the voice for youth and child safety. So tremendous buy-in. And one of the crowning things for me in seeing the results from Voice was that 97% of our people believe that the welfare of our youth in the organisation is everybody's responsibilities. And that was, I think, in large part because of the focus and the collaboration that we had within the teams in this space. So I'll hand back to you, Sarah, so that you can talk to the team around where we ended up after our year.
Okay, so just a reminder, 2017, this is where we were. Lots of red. Now, if you're expecting the next slide to suddenly be all full of beautiful green, I'm going to disappoint you, so spoiler alert, so that you know now and you're not disappointed in the next one. We're on a journey, we've moved a long way, but at this stage, we really only had a third of the organisation with us. And that's the truth. Now, 2018, I'll go back because I like this bit, look at that. Oh, 2017. Yay, 2018. So you can see that there is progress. That passion has only increased, if it can possibly be. The passion for the organisation is above any other, industry statistic, which is an amazing thing. People actually somehow feel well in their work-life balance, given that, remember, 3,500 are volunteers, so they've got their day jobs and they're volunteering, and they still feel this balance. And that's because St John is a family, and this is their friends, and they're volunteering with their friends and in their community and doing something that's worthwhile. Our progress has moved from red to yellow. I look at, we've still got a long way to go. The important thing probably is that we've now got 2/3 of the organisation. When you look at that organisational direction, and I say a third of the organisation was with us, it was actually like 27%. But we've got 2/3 now. So we have actually had big jumps of 32% across most of these areas. You'll also see that big central area around volunteer leadership and staff leadership has also turned yellow. And again, a big jumps of around 30% that we're seeing here. So that's where we are. We're on a journey. I think with the focus on organisation direction, we are steering a very large ship, and we still have a long way to go. But it is a journey that is absolutely worthwhile, and we're excited about the future. That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah and Vanessa. Extremely impressive story. As Sarah has emphasised, it's not the end of the story, so there's still plenty of work to go.
Some nice red bits in there.
There's still red bits to work on. There's always going to be red bits, I'm afraid. In terms of the questions, please send through your questions. I believe there's a little blue hand at the top right of your screen. If you mouse over it, you'll see it's an area where you can pull up a little chat thing and you can send through some questions. We have some practical ones to start with. In terms of engaging staff in that early consultation, how many staff were participated in the surveys, participated in the workshops? So how many people had a voice through the survey process or had some face-to-face contact through that consultation process? And staff and volunteers, I guess those two groups.
Yes, because they're very different. So it's a representative. Across all of it, we had a response just over 500. It's obviously about 60% of the staff had a voice through it, and that's lower in the larger 3,500. In those first engagement, we probably would have actively worked with about 300 to 400 people, and particularly around the divisional managers that would then have disseminated the information. Every executive went through in great detail all of the issues, and they then disseminated that through to their teams. We also did one large one so that we brought everybody in so that everybody was hearing the top level at the same time and then heard further detail within their own teams.
So the 80 divisionals, we call them, we actually met with them 3 times. So we knew that those were the leaders that had the best opportunity to get out to all of our volunteers. So that's where we invested our time.
Yeah. There's a question here about sort of cynicism towards surveys, especially in an environment where there's a lot of anger, as you've described it. My early experience of St John was there was quite tribal. How did you give people a sense that the survey was legit and that it was going to make a difference to the place rather than a cynical management tool that was a tick the box and people's input wouldn't make a difference?
Yeah, but I think that's really valid, and that's, there will absolutely have been people out there that went, who cares, so what? But there were some key triggers before. We had had a change, as I said, in the board. At the board level, there had been a subcommittee that had been put forward that was purely about people, performance and culture. We had appointed a general manager for people, performance and culture. So, and all of this information had been disseminated and emailed to everybody. We had to be quite clear that there was a problem with our organisation and that people were now coming first, and this was the opportunity to actually have voice. Now, they've also never had an external agency coming in to have voice, and that was absolutely around why we started working with you guys, so that they knew that they could say anything, because as you can see, I mean, really, I love my work and my team, but I really, really hate everybody else. And that was information that they had to be free to say. I mean, it really was sort of off with the head of most people.
And there was just squillions of comments.
Yeah.
People wanted to have they had things to say.
Yeah.
They used that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the people that came to the workshops, I mean, we spoke a little bit about it. Some people were just there to listen and participate and wanted to be on the journey. Other people were really, really, really angry. And it's such a journey for them to be able to say that. And I think in one of our conversations, I said one of my favourite guys who was so angry at the beginning, at probably the first or the second time that we came back to divisional managers, he said, no, Sarah, I'm cautiously optimistic. And I sort of thought, wow, what a great, cautiously optimistic, I'm winning here. But that's really what we were talking about piece by piece.
Yes. Beyond that anger, I'm sure there was active resistance from leaders or people throughout the organisation. So another question here is about how do you manage that internal resistance and the really sticky people or groups?
Yeah, and again, wouldn't we love to have a little magic potion that worked like that? I think for us is that we're always going to have sticky people. We're always going to have, we have 150 years of heritage. We've got priories, we've got a whole lot of cultural history that we are embedded with. There will always be people that think differently. I think Vanessa also mentioned it before, is that in everything that we do, we go back out to our community. Our whole hub and zone is actually around how do we get in and talk to all volunteers so that it's not us making the solutions, we're actually getting the ideas and bringing the solutions together. So you have to be, and people are really sensible. People realise that it's got to move forward. People want the same outcomes. We're all on the same journey, but you have to be prepared to hand over that decision making and make sure that it's not constantly, which is what it was before, funneling to the top, which means that it's getting stuck, but actually that decision making is free and allowed to be at grassroots as well.
And I also think that more of the peers across the organisation have been empowered. So we have a Facebook group, State Ops group, and it's very active. So we've got up to 1,000 people that are within that. And what we find, because clearly Facebook's Facebook and people don't use the same filters, but what we find is that when we get that stickiness, it's actually, we don't need to say anything. It's actually their team from other divisions or around, they're the ones that are actually going back and saying, but, or have you thought about? So it's actually...
or some of the things that's not how we behave anymore.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Right.
So, again, putting it out of your own hands also enables other people to help everybody come on the journey.
Yeah.
A question about sustainability. So you've clearly built momentum now, and you've got those people on Facebook and every day during operations that are now supporters. How do you keep them? How do you keep this momentum going? Because no doubt this has been a tiring time for you and the organisation. There's been a lot of change. Can you keep the same pace? What do you do to make sure that it stays there and doesn't somehow fall back?
Yeah. And I completely agree. And part of the development of the zones and the hubs and making sure that they were all values-based hires and that it was really robust and it was open to everybody in the organisation is a really important part of it, because that allows us to be able to communicate without every time the 15 workshops around. We still want to be doing them because they're a really important thing, but now it's also this opportunity for other people's voices to shine. When Vanessa spoke about the deputy commissioners, that my executive team is made up of volunteers and staff, and that's never been done before, and we don't precisely know how it's going to work, but it's a really important step to say that we're all one organisation, we're all on the same level. You've also got to remember that volunteers have a daytime job, and then they're giving extra of their time. So it's that, and yet they are so passionate about it that they give incredible hours every week. One of the other things I was thinking about, sustainability, we now think of volunteering differently. It's not just event health services, although that is the bulk. We also have people that work across, whether it's the leadership program, peer support. We have actuarial volunteers coming in to work with us on a finance project. We've got IT guys working on technology. So we're changing the fabric of how we operate, and I think that will make it sustainable because we're all in it. Any other?
I think actually the momentum's increasing because people are seeing the difference that's being made, and so we're getting more and more that are putting their hands up to be involved. And like I know in the next month I've got 3 projects that we're going to put it out there and get some teams working together to solve things. And I think that volunteers are getting the beauty from a career development perspective of learning from teams, but also contributing some of their expertise as well. So all of a sudden, I'm just getting integrated career development. Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah.
There's still a long way to go.
Yeah. It's a long way to go.
Put it there, but
it's definitely increasing the momentum. So it's...
people really care.
Yeah.
Too.
A question here is related to, I guess, the engagement and the retention of staff. Now, it's been a big period of change. No doubt there were some people who moved on during that change. Have you seen an impact on retention of staff or volunteers, or has it been too early for that?
No, it's improved. It's absolutely improved. I mean, and even our recruitment of the number of people wanting to volunteer is growing.
Wow, yeah.
And as you said, sort of also, particularly in youth, the university groups are growing exponentially because they're people that are in social work, health care, that want to practice, you know, as part of it, want to be part of the events. So, yeah, it's constantly changing. And surprisingly, at that time, that first couple of months, we didn't lose a lot. We lost a couple of executives that, and that often happens, that have bought into the way they saw the organisation. But we actually didn't lose anybody below one manager, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's impressive.
No, I think the thing is people wanted it. People were looking for something to actually change the game.
Yeah. Yes, but it took something big to kick that off.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it didn't happen naturally.
No. And also everybody wants it to be successful, but they've seen this over and over again. Yeah. So there is that incredible cynicism, and of course there is. So, you know, it is commitment from all of us and all across the organisation, the leaders, the divisional managers, but also every individual. That's that whole concept of how do I take action, of everybody thinking like that, that am I bringing everybody on the journey with me, no matter what your role is.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, we're approaching 12 o'clock. Are there any final reflections on the journey for yourselves? You've still got to push this through, you're still committed to, you've got your 2019, 2020 plans as well.
And then there'll be 21, 22.
Well, of course they'll be there. What's the level of optimism going forward?
Oh, well, look, I'm a rabid optimist anyway, so I don't know if that counts.
It's a leading question.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are so many opportunities. We are so lucky to be part of an organisation like this. And I think that we can see a vision and a pathway, but we also need to grow the organisation. I go out to industry, I go out to communities, I go and talk to politicians, and everybody is so open to us. Everybody wants us to succeed, and that also helps. And that helps that optimism and that belief that there are so many opportunities for us.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Great place to finish. All right. I will wrap that up. Thank you very much, Sarah and Vanessa. This webinar comes on the back of 2 breakfasts that we did in Melbourne and Sydney as well. We've had over 400 registrations for those as well. So it's been a long journey, a lot of work put in, and really appreciate sharing your journey. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
You can download the slides from the webinar site itself. So I think there's a little link on the top right, which you can, if you mouse over, it says download resources or something like that. You can get the slides. We'll also email out to all the participants in the breakfast and the webinars copies of the slides. And before you go, we have a little poll, just a feedback form. If you could fill that in as well, that would be greatly appreciated. We do take into account the feedback in terms of revising the format of these events. And we hold these events twice a year. And if you want to be invited to that, please leave your name and contact details, or contact us, and we can put you on the mailing list for these. So thank you again, Sarah, Vanessa, once more. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you found it valuable. Thank you.